In 2018, the world's most advanced rocket began life in a Texas mudfield, welded together by water tank builders with stainless steel so cheap it shocked the aerospace industry. While rivals clung to fragile composites, Elon Musk bet everything on kitchen sink metal that gets stronger at minus 270 degrees Celsius. The first test vehicle looked more like a grain silo than a spaceship, but its unpolished shell would ignite a wildfire of failures, data, and breakthroughs. How did this defiant gamble overturn everything we thought we knew about rocket science and lead to the machine built to carry humans to Mars? Welders. In stained jeans and mud-caked boots arrived at the edge of the Gulf, carrying toolboxes better suited for fixing farm silos than building rockets. Their workplace was a patch of South Texas dirt, scattered with shipping containers and the sharp smell of cut steel. There were no gleaming factories or climate-controlled clean rooms, just open-air welding rigs, the hiss of acetylene, and the steady thump of ring segments being dragged into place. SpaceX had hired contractors who knew how to piece together water tanks for ranchers, not spacecraft for Mars. Every day, crews stacked 9-meter-wide stainless steel rings, each one rolled and welded by hand. The rings were hoisted upright in the wind, sometimes with forklifts that left deep ruts in the mud. Rain turned the site into a shallow lake, but the work never stopped. Workers adapted tricks from agricultural tank jobs, using improvised scaffolding and heavy-duty clamps to force the steel into shape. Sparks flew in the open air, sometimes with nothing more than a tarp to keep the drizzle off the welders' helmets. The early prototypes didn't look like rockets, and that was the point. Starhopper's hull was built from off-the-shelf grade 301 stainless steel, the same grade used for dairy tanks and brewery vats. Instead of relying on custom aerospace parts, the team scrounged valves, pipes, and insulation from industrial suppliers. The first nose cone collapsed in a gust of wind, crumpling like a soda can, and was rebuilt within weeks. Most of the workforce didn't have aerospace backgrounds. They were tank fitters, pipe welders, and riggers from Brownsville and Corpus Christi, hired for their speed and grit. Some had never heard of a Raptor engine before the job started, but they learned fast. The site ran on urgency. Prototypes had to be stacked, pressure-tested, and rolled to the pad in weeks, not years. Welding shifts stretched late into the night, with floodlights turning the mudfield silver. There was no manual for building a spaceship in a field. The only rule was to keep moving. If a seam split during a pressure test, crews cut it out and started over. If a weld failed, they brought in more hands and thicker steel. The entire operation felt improvised, but there was a method behind the chaos. By using cheap materials and local labor, SpaceX could afford to build, break, and rebuild at a pace that left legacy aerospace companies in the dust. The grain silo look wasn't a joke or a disguise. It was the natural result of building with what was available as fast as possible. Out here, surrounded by mud and wind and the constant clang of steel, the future of spaceflight was being hammered together one weld at a time. In December 2018, Elon Musk made a decision that left aerospace veterans stunned. The plan for Starship had called for carbon fiber, lightweight, futuristic, and expensive. But Musk scrapped years of composite research with a single tweet and ordered the team to build the world's biggest rocket from stainless steel. Not aerospace-grade titanium, not advanced ceramics. Steel, the same alloy used in brewery vats and kitchen sinks, bought for $3 per kilogram. The logic wasn't about brute strength alone. At room temperature, carbon fiber beats steel for weight, but rockets don't fly at room temperature. At minus 270 degrees Celsius, the temperature of liquid methane and oxygen, steel doesn't just survive, it gets stronger. The yield strength of SpaceX's custom 300 series alloy jumps by more than 50% in the deep freeze of space. Carbon fiber, on the other hand, turns brittle. Even the aerospace industry's best resins start to fail when the thermometer plunges. For Starship, that meant steel could handle the violent chills of tanking and launch, flight after flight, without cracking or shattering. On the other end of the spectrum, re-entry is a furnace. As Starship screams back through the atmosphere, temperatures on the windward side can soar above 800 degrees Celsius. Stainless steel shrugs off that heat, its melting point sitting comfortably above the worst that re-entry can throw at it. Carbon fiber would have vaporized long before. With steel, SpaceX could skip the thick, heavy heat shields that weighed down the shuttle and focus on a lighter, more modular tile system. Cost mattered too. Carbon fiber wasn't just pricey, it was slow. Each segment had to be cured in an autoclave, a process that took days and demanded a pristine cleanroom. Stainless steel could be rolled, cut, and welded in the open air. No autoclave, no climate control, no waiting for resin to harden. If a ring was out of spec, welders could torch it apart and start again that afternoon. The price difference was staggering. Carbon fiber ran upwards of $200 per kilogram, with nearly half lost as scrap, while steel came in at a fraction of the cost and was nearly all usable. Musk called it a return to first principles. If the goal was to build a ship that could go to Mars and back over and over, it needed to be tough, cheap, and fast to repair. Steel delivered all three. The proof came in 2019 when Starhopper, little more than a steel tank with a single Raptor engine, roared 150 meters into the Texas sky. No cleanroom, no fancy composites, just raw metal welded in the mud, flying higher than any farm silo had a right to go. That hop wasn't just a test of engines. It was the moment the world realized that the future of spaceflight might be built from the same stuff as yesterday's water towers, if you were willing to gamble on the physics. Steel rings stacked in the mud became more than a shortcut. They became a laboratory. Each prototype, stamped with a serial number, was a fresh experiment. SN1 and SN3 buckled under pressure tests, their tanks splitting open at the seams. Welders patched, reinforced, and rebuilt, pushing the limits of how fast a rocket could be born, tested, and destroyed. The failures were not hidden. They were broadcast live, explosions echoing across the salt flats. Every detonation, every burst seam meant a new set of numbers, a new approach to plumbing, insulation, or weld geometry. SN4 reached a milestone no previous prototype had managed. On May 29, 2020, after a string of successful static fires, a ground support line failed during a test. Liquid methane and oxygen ignited in a fireball, erasing months of work in seconds. The lesson was brutal and clear. Tank integrity and plumbing mattered as much as engine thrust. Within days, new hardware arrived. The team rewired, rewelded, and pressed on. The pace was relentless. SN5 and SN6 flew brief low-altitude hops, proving that the basic structure could survive takeoff and landing. But the real target was higher, both literally and technically. SN8 was rolled to the pad in November 2020, bristling with new features: 3 Raptor engines, aerodynamic nose cone, and 4 steel flaps. This was the first attempt at a full-scale flight profile, a climb to 12.5 kilometers, a pitch over to horizontal, and a controlled descent. The world watched as the silver silo rose into the clouds, then tipped sideways, flaps adjusting its angle like the wings of a falling bird. For the first time, a rocket the size of an apartment building steered itself belly first through the air. SN8's descent was smooth, but the final act unraveled in the last seconds. As the rocket flipped vertical and tried to relight its engines, low pressure in the header tank starved the Raptors of fuel. The landing was a fireball, but the data was gold. Flap control worked, aerodynamics were validated, the only thing missing was a stable landing. SN9 took the pad just weeks later, nearly identical to SN8, but with fixes to tank pressurization and plumbing. Again, the rocket soared, belly flopped, and attempted the dramatic flip. This time, only 1 engine ignited instead of 2. The result? Another spectacular crash, another pile of twisted steel, and another round of furious note-taking. Each explosion rewrote the checklist. Each prototype was built faster, with lessons welded into every seam. The goal was never a flawless flight. It was to learn faster than anyone else dared. In the SN era, failure was not the end. It was the engine of progress. A rocket falling sideways through the sky defies every instinct of aerospace engineering. For Starship, the so-called belly flop is survival by design. The maneuver unfolds in 3 phases, each one a lesson in aerodynamic choreography. First comes the pitch over. As Starship reaches the apex of its flight, cold gas thrusters nudge the nose down, and the ship rotates from vertical to horizontal. This is not a gentle glide, it is a controlled drop with the hull broadside to the wind. 4 giant steel flaps, 2 at the nose and 2 at the tail, swing out like the wings of a falling bird. Their job is not to generate lift, but to create drag, slowing the descent and keeping the ship stable as it plummets earthward. Pitch over. The real magic happens in the descent phase. Here, the flaps work as giant air brakes, but with a twist. Each flap moves independently, driven by high-torque actuators. By adjusting their angles, the flight computer can shift the ship's center of pressure, tilting the nose or tail to steer. It is not about flying in the traditional sense. It is about balancing forces, using the ship's own weight and the push of the air to keep the massive body from tumbling out of control. The flaps generate aerodynamic moments, countering any unwanted spin or roll. Telemetry from SN8 showed the ship holding a steep angle of attack, bleeding off speed from over 150 meters per second down to a survivable crawl. Descent, flaps. As the ground rushes up, the final act begins. The ship is still horizontal, falling like a steel plank. At around 500 meters altitude, the engines prepare for the flip. 2 of the 3 Raptor engines ignite, gimbaling hard as cold gas thrusters kick the nose upward. The flaps tuck in, reducing drag, and the entire 50-meter ship pivots from flat to vertical in less than 2 seconds. This is the flip maneuver, a coordinated ballet of hydraulics, thrust, and momentum. If the timing is off by even a fraction of a second, the landing is lost. Flip. The logic behind this spectacle is simple but radical. By using aerodynamic surfaces to slow down and control the descent, Starship can land on its tail, ready to fly again. No parachutes, no expendable boosters. The same flaps that guide the belly flop will, one day, let the ship return from Mars and touch down safely on Earth. The maneuver is violent, precise, and utterly unlike anything that came before. It is the key to making giant rockets reusable, not just once, but dozens of times. In the dirt fields of Boca Chica, engineers turned a falling grain silo into a spacecraft that can steer itself home. Raptor was born from a gamble as bold as the switch to steel. The propulsion team set out to build an engine that did not just push the boundaries of power, but rewrote the rules of how rockets breathe and burn. At its core is the full flow-staged combustion cycle, a design so extreme only a handful of engines in history have even attempted it, and none at this scale. Instead of sending fuel and oxidizer through separate paths and wasting precious gases, Raptor drives both propellants through dual preburners. Methane and oxygen are superheated, spun through turbines at pressures above 300 bar, then injected into the main chamber in a torrent of controlled violence. The result is a chamber pressure that dwarfs even the Russian RD-180, once the world's king of rocket engines. This cycle is not just an engineering flex, it is the secret that lets Starship's heavy steel hull fly. Traditional engines would choke on the mass, but Raptor's efficiency, a specific impulse of 330 seconds in vacuum, means more thrust for every kilogram of rocket. Each Raptor delivers about 230 tons of force, enough to lift a fully loaded 747 airliner. Cluster 33 of them, and the Super Heavy booster produces over 7,500 tons of thrust, twice the power of the Saturn V. The trade-off is brutal. The engine must survive temperatures and pressures that would shred most metals, and every weld, every turbine blade is a potential point of failure. But the payoff is clear. With full-flow staged combustion, SpaceX can stack cheap steel rings and still reach orbit, turning what looks like a flying grain silo into the world. most advanced rocket. The propulsion engineers behind Raptor did not just build an engine, they built a machine that makes the impossible routine. Super Heavy does not just dwarf every rocket that came before, it rewrites what is possible. 33 Raptor engines thunder at liftoff, pushing out more than 7,500 tons of thrust, nearly double the Saturn V record. The scale is raw, 120 meters tall, a stack of welded steel rings rising higher than a football field is long. The ground shakes for miles when the full stack lights. But brute force is only half the story. SpaceX set out to do what no one else dared, to catch a 20-story booster as it falls back to Earth. Instead of wasting time and fuel landing on distant drone ships, Super Heavy aims for zero downtime. Giant steel arms, known as the chopsticks, swing out from the launch tower. They track the booster's descent with industrial precision, closing around the grid fins in mid-air. In October 2024, Booster 12 became the first orbital-class rocket ever caught by machine. No parachutes, no ocean landings, just a mechanical handshake that turns a controlled fall into a ready-to-refly booster. The ambition does not stop at recovery. Starship's design includes a system for in-orbit refueling. One ship docks with another, pumping cryogenic methane and oxygen across in microgravity. This single trick multiplies Starship's range, allowing it to haul heavy payloads to the Moon, Mars, or beyond. The refilling process, once science fiction, is now a core part of the architecture. Every ring of steel, every catch, every refueling test is proof that the so-called grain silo is no joke. The world's most advanced rocket did not come from a sterile lab. It was built in mud, stacked in the wind, and now stands ready to carry the future off the planet. Right now, the most advanced rocket ever built is still being welded, tested, and rebuilt in that Texas dirt. Its success isn't just a win for engineers, it is a blueprint for how bold, unconventional thinking can upend entire industries. As new launches ignite, the line between scrap metal and Starship disappears. The next leap forward may already be taking shape in places no one expects. Thanks for watching.